Think about it. Describe the culture of honor and provide two pieces of evidence that support this characterization. What might be the origin of these cultural tendencies? So the origin is that in the US South, the Scots-Irish were historically herders, and if they were threatened, like with an insult, they needed to be able to stand up for themselves or they could lose all of their livelihood, all of their animals, whereas farmers, it's not really like that. Nature can kind of take that away, but other humans can't all in one fell swoop like that so easily. So farmers are more peaceful. They're from like Germany and the Netherlands. Okay. Describe the culture of honor. Yeah, so people in the US South are more likely to murder each other because of insults, because they have that heightened. There was a study that showed when they were aggressed on, they responded with like heightened testosterone, and then they were less likely to back aside when a large Confederate walked down a narrow hallway toward them, or they got closer to him before they turned aside. Yeah. Two pieces of evidence that support this characterization. Sometimes in the U.S. South, apparently employers were even friendly or positive toward employees that had written, potential employees that had written that they had been convicted of manslaughter to defend their honor. According to the research described in this chapter, what kinds of attitudes and behaviors are more likely among men who dehumanize women? Rape, violence, probably treating women as property, which it doesn't really talk about. Less access to education, and keeping gender disparities up by the threat of rape. Suppose you're the warden at a prison and can select the temperature setting for the master prison thermostat, but the thermostat doesn't have enough settings, forcing you to choose between an uncomfortably cold setting and an uncomfortably hot setting. Which should you choose and why? Well, you have to choose the cold setting because the hot setting increases violence and it's a prison, so you don't want that. Sometimes people respond to social rejection with physical aggression. How does the fundamental nature of our need for social connectedness help explain this tendency? So, social rejection and isolation. Basically, we experience it like pain. And so, like, if you think of school shooters, I mean, they're just in so much pain, and they often kill themselves afterwards, too. They just want the pain to stop. Suppose a friend said to you, well, men are just biologically hardwired to be more aggressive than women. How would you respond? What nuances might this perspective miss? Well, the whole evolutionary perspective misses a lot of nuance, right? You can try to counter it with the cultural perspective, which would talk about the precarious manhood hypothesis, in which men have to keep proving their manhood. Like, the default for women is not threatened. Women are always perceived as women, but if men act, say, like a pussy, quote unquote, then you have to reprove your masculinity. It's like the default position for men is also female in a sense. So when men are perceived as more feminine, like the experiment where they braided hair instead of braiding rope, then they punched stuff harder afterward to reassert their masculinity and their manhood. What kinds of strategies have been shown to be most effective for reducing conflict and promoting peace, and why? So you have to keep the information flow between the two parties complex enough, and you have to try to look at concessions made by the other party as still valuable. You can do reconciliation. You really do want face-to-face contact, because people, though we have a tendency toward violence and conflict, we also have a tendency actually toward making up and reconciliation.